One of the most common questions that I hear is, what's the difference between rentable and usable square feet, and how are they both calculated? This is a little complicated, so hang in there with me. The space that a tenant can actually use is called usable, or sometimes it's called carpetable square footage. This may be very important to the tenant in laying out furniture, but it is not the critical component in calculating rent. The rent in most leases incorporates both the usable square footage plus the tenant's proportionate share of common areas in the building. The sum of these two is known as rentable square footage. The difference between the rentable and usable square footage in a building is commonly known as the loss or the load factor. As an example, if by measurement it is determined that 15% of a building is devoted to common areas, an example being lobbies, hallways, lavatories, then this will become the loss factor for every lease in the building. Industrial leases may also have a loss factor to incorporate common sprinkler, power, or storage rooms. The measurement and calculation of these figures is by no means an exact science, and a number of standards have been established to bring objectivity into the marketplace. The major standards used in the New York metropolitan area are BOMA, the Building Owners and Managers Association, REBNY, the Real Estate Board of New York, and AIA, American Institute of Architects. Each has a slightly different method on how to measure common areas and perimeter walls. If you are a tenant, you should be aware that landlords are often deliberately vague on the measurement of loss factor, to the point sometimes that it just becomes another item to be negotiated, like the rent or a work letter. From a space utilization point of view, it is critical that a tenant knows that the usable square footage will be sufficient for his or her needs. And in our experience, this assurance is only possible with the preparation of a tenant space plan, showing the exact location of each piece of furniture or equipment. You will most often be quoted rentable square footage by a broker or landlord. The approximate usable square footage may be calculated by multiplying the rentable square footage by the loss or load factor and subtracting the result from the rentable square footage. Let me give you an example. If the landlord quotes the size of a suite at 5,000 square feet rentable with a 15% loss factor, you would first multiply 5,000 square feet by 15% to compute the lost area of 750 square feet. Subtracting 750 from 5,000 gives you an approximate usable size of 4,250 square feet. It is very important for a tenant to address this issue before a lease is signed, as there is usually little or no recourse after lease execution. Most leases have no direct calculations of either usable or rentable square footage, and if a rentable figure is provided, it is almost always modified with the word approximate. It is incumbent, therefore, on a tenant to first determine that the suite under consideration is adequate for the proposed use by means of a space plan, and secondly, have some reasonable assurance that the loss factor represented by the landlord approaches reality. In the end, there are no set formulas or rules that must be followed. The solution is a clear understanding of the actual square footage to be occupied, along with a satisfactory agreement on the rentable square footage in the lease document.